Welcome to the Pursuit of Wellbeing podcast. My name's Maria Brosnan. I'm the founder of Pursuit and your host for the show. This podcast is dedicated to providing wellbeing information, inspiration and support for teachers, leaders and school staff around the world. My guest today is Victoria Hewitt. Victoria is subject leader for geography and environmental science, along with professional tutor for early career teachers at Tunbridge Grammar School. The teacher behind Mrs Humanities on Twitter, author of Making It as a Teacher, and proud ambassador for the UK charity, the Education Support Partnership. Victoria, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Great to have you here today. We're recording this at the last day of half term in October. So I just wanted to firstly check in and see how you are, how it's been going, and just a little kind of check-in of what school's been like for you.
Yeah, it's been enjoyable but very strange. We are working so that the students stay where they are and the teachers move around. So we're all getting our step count up quite a bit. Yeah. And I guess it's just kind of getting used to the new normal, as everyone keeps saying.
Yeah. And so tell me, what is it in terms of workload? Let's kind of dive straight in, because I know on your website, and I'll put a link to it a little bit later, but you've got tons of resources, fantastic resources talking about workload. What can we talk about practically today? What advice would you give practically to help manage workload under these current circumstances?
I'd say the first thing is to recognise that actually there's only so much we can do under the current circumstances, and being kind to ourselves and recognising that actually it's okay if we don't get everything done, because there's so much more to think about at the moment. And I'm finding that, for instance, with the remote teaching and then also the classroom teaching, you're trying to balance several things at once. And as a result, your mind is just everywhere. Yeah. So at the moment, the one thing I would say is kind of like the thing to focus on is trying to do less and do less, but better quality with that. So, for instance, within our curriculum in school, we haven't taken anything out, but we're trying not to cover it in too much depth and too much kind of faff, so to speak, so that actually the students are getting what they need for, say, the GCSE curriculum or the IB curriculum. But I'm not doing all the kind of other inquiry stuff that we normally do as well, just so then they're actually focusing on what they need going forward.
And you make a really good point about doing less better. Do you have a personal kind of system or a way of filtering that? You know, how do you prioritize the most important things?
So I like to use the Eisenhower matrix and kind of look at the things that I need to do immediately, straight away, the things that are going to be of most importance to my teaching practice, basically. So the things that are for my classroom always come first. And then it's just prioritising tasks and things that I need to do, and looking at what I might be able to delegate, what can wait a little while, and then what can eventually get to the bottom of the list and never get done.
Yes, I have a to-don't list.
Yeah.
And so tell me, what's I haven't heard of the Eisenhower matrix. What's that?
So basically, I kind of use it slightly differently to the actual matrix. But basically, it is just 4 divisions of a task or jobs that you need to do. And it is kind of just prioritising those that need to be done now and immediately, those that need to be done but can wait, those that could be delegated, and those that eventually just sink to the bottom of the list and disappear.
Right, I get you. Okay, yeah. I have a similar one, and it's urgent and important. And it's just, you fill in the matrix of those things, and it sounds like you get to a similar result. I think it's so useful to have some kind of framework to help you make those decisions, because otherwise it can be just so overwhelming, can't it, when you've got so much to do? Absolutely,
yeah. And I think at the moment, because there is so much that is overwhelming us, teachers that are also parents, they've got the childcare at home, they've got the COVID changes within schools, and then, trying to teach remotely or virtually as well as in the classroom. it's just so much to think about.
Yeah. And you talk about setting up your computer for easy access in lessons. So tell us more about that, just some practical steps that you use.
Yeah, so one of the things I've done is, so we are now, within my school, we are using Teams and SharePoint for kind of all computer access. So all our resources that used to be on the school system are now on SharePoint. So what I've done is I've bookmarked everything onto my Google Chrome, and as a result, it means I can just kind of click at a button and everything is there that I need that day. So first thing in the morning, I will bookmark any websites that I want to use with students, any videos that I want to use with students, so then I'm not having to wait for them to download during the lesson. And basically, it's just everything's there at the click of a button.
Yeah. And tell us, give us the link to your website and tell us a bit more about your website and what resources colleagues could find there.
Okay, so my website is mrshumanities.com, and essentially it's a kind of resource for geography, history, and sometimes the other humanities. And on there, I've got lots of resources that can be used within lessons. I've also got packs of resources on there, so anything that kind of just helps other teachers to reduce their workload a little bit. I've also got quite a variety of just general teaching and learning activities and resources, so things like a template bank of just blank resources that can then be adapted to suit different needs. Basically, the aim is just to help others to reduce their workload.
And that's amazing. And what made you think of doing that when you're clearly your own workload is heavy, as all teachers are? What made you think to do that?
So basically, the last school I was working at, I was a solo department. Those that did also teach humanities were from other departments, and therefore they were non-specialists. And basically, I was creating all these resources, and it was taking me hours. And I just felt that, they were being used by myself, and really they could probably be used by other people. So I figured that whilst I was spending hours making these, I might as well share them to save hours for other people. And because I started using Twitter at the same time as well, what I found was that people were willing to share with me. So I kind of wanted to give something back to maybe other people that were looking for a little bit of support. And yeah, that's where it kind of arose from.
Nice. I think Twitter's great for that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The education community on Twitter is remarkable. So you're the ambassador to the Education Support Partnership. So can you tell us about that? How did you come to that role, and what do you do?
So I'd say I'm probably more than just the ambassador. I'm one of quite a few. And basically, I kind of got involved with the charity after I had to reach out to them for support. In 2016, I had a bit of a mental breakdown as a result of workload and workplace stress. And by calling Ed Support, it gave me the confidence to take some time off work, try and recover to some extent, and kind of get back on my feet. I do believe that if I hadn't spoken to them, I probably would have ended up leaving teaching. And as a result, I kind of shared my story with Ed Support, and they did a little blog on it, and then kind of went from there. So I've done a few kind of peels with them and a video with them, and I'm currently working on something for Christmas this year as well.
Mm. And what would you say to people that are listening to this podcast that might be in the position that you were in leading up to that time of burnout or breakdown for you?
The first thing I would say there, the first bit of advice would be accept how you're feeling. It's okay if you do not feel okay, essentially. Because at the time, I felt very guilty about the way I was feeling. I felt quite selfish because I was burdened with workload, but I felt like I needed to do it for other people. So then when I was feeling kind of stressed and anxious because of that, I was it was very kind of, for me, it was, I felt like I was being selfish about it. But then I realized that actually it's okay to find things hard. It's okay to feel stressed and anxious. And once I started to kind of accept that, that's when I started to recover. But unfortunately, because I didn't recognize that soon enough, it meant that I got to the point where I did break down. I burnt out, and it took a lot longer to recover from that than if I'd noticed prior to actually getting to that point. So it's really important to kind of check in with how you're feeling. And if you do find yourself being stressed, anxious, worried, and the likes, that you then reach out sooner rather than later, so you don't actually get to the point where you are breaking down or burning out. And that's where people can ring Ed support and get that kind of guidance and hopefully that confidence to do something.
Yeah. And what were the symptoms that you experienced, or possibly even what are some symptoms that other people might be experiencing that are red warning lights that they should be looking out for?
Oh, where do I start with that one? So for me, it was a kind of sick feeling in my stomach every morning. I didn't want to go to work. And when I thought about work, I would get quite panicked about it. I'd think about the to-do list that I had, and sometimes I would physically shake. And I think there were probably a few warning signs before that point. Just having that kind of nervousness when going to work, kind of having days where I was a little bit more emotional than I probably would have normally been, being very tired, exhausted, and recognizing that actually you are feeling stressed, you are feeling anxious or worried, is kind of, probably one of the first things to look for is that, just that sense of dread, I guess.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling. Yeah, definitely. And to do something then, rather than, you described feelings of guilt, and I think that it's such a common feeling for teachers to feel that they're letting somebody down.
Yeah.
But not to ignore those feelings, because it's not going to get better on its own.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You definitely
tell us about your book. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You definitely need to reach out if you are feeling in that way.
Yeah, definitely. And sooner rather than later. So your book is called Making It as a Teacher, How to Survive and Thrive in the First 5 Years. How did that book come about? And tell us a little bit about that.
So essentially it all kind of arose from a blog I wrote, a blog post. I'd reached the end of my first 5 years in teaching, and I'd written this kind of reflection about each year of my teaching experience to that date. And from there, I was then contacted by somebody at Routledge and just asked, would I be interested in writing a book? And it kind of just went from there. And then before I knew it, I'd published it, and it was on bookshelves. And
Well done. And what are the key messages from your book?
The key message is definitely that the first 5 years can be challenging. They can be difficult because you are learning and getting to grips with so much. You're learning everything from behaviour management, time management, to actual classroom practice, working with parents, working with colleagues. There's a lot to take on board, but it does get easier. And it might be that you have to try several different workplaces before you find what fits and what works for you. And that actually there's lots of opportunities within the education sector if you do find that the school that you are at isn't right, and you want to go elsewhere. There's lots of ways that you can do that. And again, it's that kind of reaching out and taking the steps to kind of help yourself, essentially.
And you talk about the power of learning to say no. I see this a lot. I'm in schools a lot, or talking with teachers a lot, and senior leadership teams. Boundaries can be very very easy to cross, very unclear, especially now when staff are working at home, if not full-time, but at least part-time, or taking work home in different ways. How do you set clear boundaries? How do you learn how to say no?
So for me, it has been a lesson I learned the hard way. I used to say yes to everything, to the point that when I was going through the breakdown experience, before I actually reached that point, I was asked to write a wellbeing policy, and I said yes. And it was one of those things that never got done. But the fact that I then got to the point where I did burn out, I couldn't keep saying yes. I really did learn the hard way. But I hope that now that people are starting to think about wellbeing a lot more within schools, and also thinking about workload alongside that, I'm hoping that people are starting to see that actually it is okay to say yes to the things that really matter and say no to the things that may not necessarily be of benefit to your classroom practice or your aspirations for progression, and focusing on the things that are most important to you, which for the majority of us is the actual classroom teaching.
I was reading a blog that you did about Teacher 5 a Day and how that helped you in finding a kind of framework for your own wellbeing. So tell us about Teacher 5 a Day for people who don't know what it is, and what their work did and what you did with your pledges with Teacher 5 a Day.
Hey, so Teacher 5 a Day, I first got involved with that, I think it was about 2015, 2016. And the idea is that you kind of pledge to achieve these 5 little kind of standards. So the one is connect. So actually kind of getting out and connecting with your friends, your family, and building those relationships. The others are exercise, pretty obvious. Learn, again, quite obvious. Notice, so actually taking the time to notice the things around you. And the final one is
volunteer,
that's it. So the idea of kind of giving back in some way or other. And what I did was I didn't kind of follow it to the extent that some people did, but I had it as a guidance for myself. And in doing so, it kind of just allowed me to step back from being a teacher a bit and think about myself as a human being, and essentially find myself and the person that I am outside of work. The thing I found most beneficial about it was the community, though, because that gave you the support and people to talk to, and just generally that kind of enthusiasm to keep going.
And do you still practice the 5 a day? Is that part of your kind of wellbeing plan for yourself?
I do try to. It's more, for me now, it's more about recognizing that I need a break and recognizing that I need to go and connect with people, and then actually finding the time to make sure I do that. Obviously, under the current circumstances, it's slightly harder, but just trying to find alternative ways of doing so has been really important.
And what about being kind to yourself? What do you do to take care of yourself?
So to take care of myself, I generally try to exercise quite a bit. I haven't done quite so much in the last few weeks because I've just been so exhausted from work. But if I'm not doing that, then I'm kind of journaling or writing letters or reading, just kind of having calm moments where I can just take things at a leisurely pace and just connect with myself.
It's so important, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Because the work that I teach in my online course, I use the 5 ways as the framework for the course that I teach. And I think it's such a foundational way to understand our well-being and to create a framework and a model that we can use to build on. We're coming to the end of our time, Victoria. Is there anything else you'd like to add about anything that you think would help your colleagues that are listening to the podcast today?
just that it's just so important to check in on yourself, check in on your colleagues, and reach out as and when you need to, whether that's to a friend, a family member, or a professional organisation such as the Ed Support.
Thank you so much. I've been speaking with Victoria Hewitt. You can connect with Victoria on Twitter at Mrs Humanities, and her website is mrshumanities.com, and the Education Support Partnership is educationsupport.org.uk. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Now check out our website, pursuitwellbeing.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, and if you feel inspired, please rate and review it and share it with your friends. I love getting your feedback and learning how we can improve our program.